supportive of our work here. And so with that regard, I want everybody to know that. Can we approve the minutes of the last meeting of November the 7th?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the minutes as printed.
A second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Joe Zach,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Terry Atkins,
Here. Yes. Okay, moving on. We have a presentation that Mark Randall has put together for us and others. So let's move to that now.
Thanks, Mr. Chairperson. I think the board some time ago asked for more information about our NERC unit and explain how that works and the importance of it. We always talk about its multiple legs of the stool, and one of them is rates, which is so important, and another is financial sustainability, but another big part is reliability. And there's a lot of things, as you know, that go into the reliability, and this is one of the key parts of it. So Mike Murray is the manager of the NERC division, and he'd like to give a presentation to you explaining what they do and how it relates to our reliability. So Mike, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. This is an informational presentation. If you have questions, jump in. I think you've probably already seen this. I'm not going to read these slides to you. Can you hear me? I'm not going to read these slides to you. I will speak to them, maybe try and flesh them out a little bit. I don't have any questions for you today. I'm not asking you for anything, so just enjoy yourselves. If you want to know something else, why say so. At the end of this, there's also, I showed Mark a little YouTube video from FERC. It's about 5 or 6 minutes. If we have time, you want to see it, fine. If you think, you want to stop there and ask some questions, that's fine too. So we'll address that at the end. All right, let's see if we can make this work. All right. As Mark said, we've been talking about rates almost consistently here for a long time. They're really important. But when it comes down to it, rates aren't important at all if you don't have electricity flowing through the lines. So reliability is part of what we do. Not the day-to-day stuff that the T&D guys do such a really good job on. We're talking about big grid stuff. So you can see here, this is what we talk about when we're talking about the grid. There's 3 regions. We're in the eastern region. Do see that it goes up into Canada there. That's kind of important later when we talk about NERC, because they're a little different organization. Do want to say one thing starting out here. This is labeled bulk power system, or BPS. I'm also going to talk about bulk electric system, or BES. There is a difference, a slight difference. For our purposes today, we're going to use them interchangeably. BPS technically is a little broader, apparently. That's kind of over my head. But when you talk about BPS, you're usually talking about the grid. When you talk about BES, bulk electric system, you're usually talking about reliability standards with NERC. So that's when they're used. So, but they're interchangeable for most purposes. Okay, I like to start out once upon a time, blah, blah, blah. Back in the day before 2005, we were self-regulated as an industry. We had readiness evaluations. Paul Lampy and I actually went on one out to Sunflower, out in Kansas. They were peers from other utilities would go around and say, we think there's best practice. Here's where you're weak. Here's where you think we can do better, and made suggestions. It was voluntary whether you did them or not, but we'd actually people would actually give them, programs or whatever, actually documentation handed to it. Here, well, this will make you better. Federal government wasn't involved. When we entered the era of electric utility regulation, we're talking back in 1920. The Federal Water Power Act of 1920 was set up to coordinate hydroelectric projects. 1935, that act was changed to the Federal Power Act. So everything we talk about from here on out is going to be related to this Federal Power Act. Everything is an amendment to that. So you have a few things over here, the Federal Power Act, and then a ton of amendments. Everything relates back to this. This was the start back in 1922, the Federal Power Commission. That's what will later become FERC. So everything just kind of moves ahead incrementally in this deal. So then we started having a series of blackouts in more modern times. In 65, you can see we had 30 million folks out for 13 hours in the Northeast. There were others, but these were the big ones. These were big ticket items. And you can see in 68 there, that was a start at Reliability Council. That was a start of what would later become NERC. 77, New York City, 9 million for a day. You can see up there in 77, that's where the name was changed to Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. So now that was established. You also had down here in 1992, Energy Policy Act of 92. That's when they first started talking about mandatory stuff. So up to this point, we're still just voluntary, right? We're self-regulated. Okay, 2003, we had that Northeast blackout, ton of people for 4 days. That really spurred a lot of action. So in 2005, as an amendment to the Federal Power Act, they had this Energy Policy Act of 2005. Purpose of that was reliability of the bulk power system overall. That's when mandatory standards came. Now, there's going to be an implementation period to 2007, but this is when it technically went into effect. So you have mandatory standards, penalties for noncompliance. Then you can see in 2006, you had NERC was designated the Electric Reliability Organization, the ERO. So that's the group that's going to take care of putting these into effect. This section 215 is underlined there on the slide because that's what everybody that talks about this will talk about. Section 215 gives us the power to blah, 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 right? That's what they're going to come back to on that. There's some other stuff, but you'll hear that over and over if you're in the industry. Then in 2007, that's when NERC delegated down to these regional entities that we'll talk about in a minute, and they enforce these reliability standards. I did want to make the note here that this has nothing to do with the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. This is a whole different thing. Just want to make it real clear. So the big picture we've got here is the federal government, Congress, whatever, will get an idea, something happens, or we have a big blackout, and it's blah, blah, blah. They'll tell FERC, you got to do something. FERC will put out an order. We kind of skip DOE, and I'll explain that in a little bit. FERC is an independent agency. They don't have to report back to DOE. DOE doesn't have the power to review their decisions. So you kind of sort of skip that step. So it goes to FERC. They say we need NERC, we need a regulation. NERC will work with the entities to come up with these reliability standards. We supposedly have input into that. We do have input into that. The bottom line is, though, there's a nuclear option in that section 215. If we don't play along, well, the option is, do this or we're going to do so-and-so, right? So after a certain amount of messing around, when we don't like the standards, then it goes back and FERC will just put the hammer down and say, here it is, folks. This is what you got to do. That's the reality of this. Then it goes to the RE. They do all the audit stuff. And the entities. That 1,400 number, there's probably, I don't know, maybe you guys know, 3,500 electric utilities in the United States. I think that refers to generation numbers. So now what we have is we have FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, who regulates interstate transmission of electricity, gas and oil. That affects us three ways here as a unit. They regulate transmission projects and wholesale electric sales. So systems operations, rates and planning, probably T&D. That affects them. They also provide some operational cost data if we play along and give them our data through this FERC accounting system. So IPL and city functions always have this FERC number out there on the end of our accounts, and that lets them assign dollars and cents to those accounts. For purposes of today, what we're talking about is this third thing, where we regulate reliability of the grid through reliability standards. So my group, this NERC compliance group, that's what we do. We also do some cybersecurity stuff in addition, but that's been our main function from the get-go. NERC, North American Reliability Corporation. Now, I told you it was an independent corporation. It is not a governmental agency. There's several reasons for that, but the primary reason for that is because regulations extend up to Canada. What are there, 6 provinces, I think? I think 3 or 4 of them have accepted NERC, and then the others have accepted NERC to a degree. So basically, they're under this regulation too. So you can't have a U.S. governmental agency regulating Canada. Well, yeah, I don't know if it could or not, but you shouldn't. So that's one reason it's an independent agency. Then the regional entities were set up just to do audit stuff. So they do the audits, they take care of, we have remediation or mitigation of noncompliance, and they recommend penalties, which goes back through an authorization process through NERC and FERC, back up the chain. FERC has the last say on it. So they can cut it. If they don't like the recommendation, they'll say, you know, it should cost them more or it cost them less. It's hardly ever less. I'll just say that. Let's see where we are here. These are the regional entities that we've been talking about. There used to be 8 of these when they were formed, and we used to report to the Southwest Power Pool. Now, the Southwest Power Pool is also a regional transmission organization, RTO. That has to do with market and transmission and other stuff that I could care less about. Well, I care, but I don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. The regional entities are a separate piece of those organizations that do the audit stuff. So SPP still exists, but it's no longer a regional entity. There was also an outfit called Florida Reliability Coordinating Council in the state of Florida. It's gone away too. So there used to be 8, now there's 6. When we did this transition in 2018, we were supposedly had some input into where we were going to go. We could have gone to CERC, which you see on down here in the lower part of the map. We chose to go to MRO, and every last one of the 199 folks from SPP went to MRO. In the end, they just told us, here's where you're going, poof. So what that did wasn't a bad thing. MRO is a great organization, but we were well established in SPP. We knew all the audit guys. We knew what they were looking for. We knew how it worked. We had some influence down there. Plus, there were only 200 organizations, utilities. Now there's 400. We're having a real hard time pushing our way into those organizations. We made a lot of tries, but there's some big folks up there, and they've been an MRO for a long time. So we're trying to wedge ourselves in there. It's going to be rough. We have not had an audit yet with MRO. What we're hearing is that they're looking for different stuff. So we're going to try to catch up as fast as we can and as much as we can. I'm not concerned about it, but yeah.
Just a quick question. If we're not relating to SPP, but we now are to MRO, do we still buy our power from SPP? Or what's that relationship?
That's that regional transmission organization. That still exists. Paul and all the guys are still SPP, and we belong to some SPP stuff. It's just this audit piece for the standards that we transferred over to MRO. That's all it went away. So it was a bifurcated deal at SPP. So the RTO stayed in place. The regional entity went away. Am I getting this across? Okay.
Clear as mud.
Okay. The bottom line is they got out of that business and we all went to MRO. And so here we go. All right. This is fun. These are the standards. There's 2 different parts. Critical infrastructure protection. They call it SIP, right? It's essentially cybersecurity. There's a little bit of physical security that goes along with it for subs and primary operation centers and so forth, because you're protecting those cyber assets. But it's all about cybersecurity. It's a pretty good program. It's fairly comprehensive, but it's not a complete and utter cybersecurity program. It's a little spotty. It changes all the time. They used to modify the SIP standards as a group all at once. They'd be version 1, version 2. Now they do them individually, each standard. That's the same thing on the other piece. The other piece of it is operations and planning. And that's what we've been doing for 100 and some years. That's generation, transmission. That's all the other stuff that we do every day. So we've got a pretty good handle on that. They're modified one at a time, too. So what I'm saying here, when I say they're modified individually, you may be working on version 5 today. You're looking forward down the road at version 6, 7, or 8. They're that far out. So we're trying to prepare as we work today. We're looking forward about, okay, we're doing this fine. We're compliant today. But the minute that kicks in, boom, we'll be non-compliant. So we've got to look forward to that ahead of time. What else here? We're talking about 11 standards for SIP, a couple of hundred requirements, 80 standards for operations and planning, approximately 1,300 requirements. So we got 91 standards, about 1,500 requirements. It's changing all the time, all the time. That's the one thing about this world. It changes tomorrow, every day. We're back to the 2 categories. SIP is SIP. It is what it is. Here's the other things that Jim Nail deals with every day. You can see they're pretty comprehensive. That covers a lot of stuff that we do as an electric utility. The notation is down there in the bottom. It's kind of weird. When you get around NERC people, they talk about SIP 2 005, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this is the way it is. The category, it's either SIP or O&P, and they'll have, in this instance, PRC, which is protection and control. Then the second piece is the standard number, and there can be a couple of standards under each of these. There can be 13 standards. Same thing for version. That's which you're any place from version 1 through version 6 or 7 now. The version 1 is because they're making some new standards. So that's the first of those, right? So we're working at any one time with a whole range of standards. It gets a little complex, but it is linear. At least it's linear. The R's there, that's the requirement number. So that's the bottom line. Do this, do that, do this, do that. That's the actual things you have to put into effect to be compliant. Some of these standards are 8 or 10 pages. Some of them are 50 pages. I don't know what an average is, but I'd say 20-ish pages. And some of it's filler and fluff, and some of it is, technical language. We do have input to these standards, and it gets really crazy. You talk about the Oxford comma. Do we say of here? Is there a comma there? Does that mean this phrase? Because it all relates. Do you have to do all of this? Do you have to do some of it? Do you have to do none of it? We're arguing all the time about that, and then they tell us what to do in the end. What we have to cover under those standards is based on what we do as a business. So there are 15 NERC registrations, categories of what do you do. We used to be registered for 10 of those, and that matches up with what KCP&L is, BPU, a lot of bigger outfits. That's a kind of a standard stock base load for these registrations. In the last few years, the RTOs, that's the people now that deal with the market and transmission and other stuff, they've taken over several of these for everybody. This is just not IPL deregistering. This is everybody deregistered. So now we have 7 categories. That is still a full boat. That means all of those, almost every one of those standards applies to us. There's a couple that we don't. Let's go to that. Well, let me say this. That's what I'm trying to say here. We're a small entity in terms we don't have a ton of facilities that meet the BES 100 kV. That's the threshold for BES stuff, right? So, but we are still subject to 92.5% of the SIP requirements and a comparable number, I think, for the O&P requirements, honestly. So what's that mean? That means we have to have the same processes, procedures, documents, data, internal controls, and knowledge as all the big guys. The difference is they have internal audit. They have a lot of help from training departments. They've got 50 different people, 75 committees, blah, 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 blah. There's 4 of us. Now, we have a ton of help from our SMEs. That's the other guys. And they're really good. They're really cooperative. If they didn't cooperate with us, we'd be dead in the water. I'll tell you right now, we could not do it without the SMEs. The other piece of it is the audit uses a sampling process because they can't look at a stack of data like this, 6 foot tall. So the sampling process depends on who you talk to, 5 or 10% of your data. So we're turning in essentially not the same amount, but a good portion of the amount of the bigger guys. So our exposure is pretty darn close to what the big guys have. This chart is really interesting. This tells you, this is the official chart for what you get fined if you're non-compliant. So this may be one of the most important slides in the deck. I don't know. Over there on the left, you can see the blue. It's talking about violation risk factor. That's the inherent risk to the bulk electric system. So is it a cyber, you don't have a firewall, or is it just an administrative issue where you had a comma out of place or a date wrong, or you were a day late on your program or something like that? Across the top there, the violation severity level, that's how bad was the non-compliance thing. Was it over a 2-year period? Was it only a couple of days? Was it a big ticket item? Was it a little ticket item? So you put those together. If it were an administrative issue that you didn't screw up too bad, that's $1,000 a day fine. This is per day, per violation. And the second that they catch you non-compliance, boom, you're on the clock. Theoretically. If it's a big ticket item, let's say we don't have a firewall and we don't even have a program to say we ought to have a firewall, theoretically, they could fine us $1 million a day. We all know that's not going to happen because they put us out of business. The penalties are based significantly on how big you are. That's why you'll see a little later. I'm going to show you what fines we paid and what we haven't. Some of our neighbors have paid mid 6 figures. We have not approached anything like that. I don't know if you have any questions about this, but it's the problem I have is the way these fines are decided is if you have a non-compliant issue, there's a super secret formula that NERC has out there. And it's a wonderful thing, apparently, but we started when we were in SPP writing down every time they said this is a factor in that formula. Well, we got to 50 or 60 and we said, wait a minute, what's going on here? It's secret. They won't tell us exactly, but anything they want you to do, they tell you, well, this is a factor in that formula. So the REs, the regional entities, can pretty much weight it any way they want. So if you're not a favorite or you make them mad, you're in a lot of trouble because they will weight that thing. It'll go in, and NERC and FERC, they just look at the form. Yeah, okay, you weighted it like this. That makes sense to them. So the REs have a tremendous amount of power on how much fines are, what the penalties are. What if we don't want to play? This is kind of a deal. You can see most of these are fines in the past. You can see the dates on them there. Big money. The reason that's big money is because those are big people. And some of them screwed up pretty good, too. They didn't take it serious. That's the whole point of this. City Utilities Springfield here close to home, when this whole thing started, they said, I don't think you guys ought to apply this to us. They were talking about the SIP standards at that point. They went to court with them, and they lost. And $500,000 later, more or less, now they're doing the SIP standards just like everybody else, I guess. So the bottom line is you don't fight City Hall. You don't fight these folks anyway. This Duke Energy thing, here's the thing. Everybody except Springfield up there did not have a culture of compliance. Now, culture of compliance is another thing where there's 50 different things that go into it. But FERC put out an article that had 13 basic elements of that. We have what we call an internal compliance program document, ICP, and it contains all of those 13 things. Some of it's discipline, some of it's this, some of it's that. But if you don't have those things and you don't have that document and you don't follow those concepts for them, then you're lagging. That Duke thing was $10 million. They had 127 violations over, was it 4 or 10 years, Jim? 4 years, let's say. It wasn't that the violations were so bad. They weren't that bad. They were just upset because they weren't playing nice. They weren't taking it serious. NERC is very touchy about, you have to be dead serious about this stuff. You have to really be trying, put a lot of effort out, have a lot of resource out there. I could go on and on and on. Management support's a big deal, having enough resources, and really they just want to see that you're making a really good effort. If it says have a program, you better have a program. Now, if you miss an element in that program or something, okay, that's not too bad. But if you don't have a program, they're going to come after you. It's going to cost you a ton of money. Now, you may think I was cherry picking with those others. These are NERC penalties for 2019. So you can still, it's ongoing here. What you're seeing here is the regional entities. They don't put the name of the utility out there because, let's say if it's a SIP violation and I know what you did wrong and I know who you are, I could come after you. That's the theory, at least, right? So they just give the regional entity there. But you can see there's still people, it's still costing them some money. Either they're slow learners or, well, I won't go, I don't know what's matter. I don't know what's up there. So I guess the big deal is, how are we doing? We're doing pretty well. We have some, I'm going to brag on these guys. We have Jim Nail does the O&P stuff. Steve Arnold and Jeff Parker do the SIP stuff. They're good people. They've got a lot of experience and know what they're doing. We haven't had any dollar penalties since 2011 audit. Doesn't mean we didn't have any non-compliant issues. It means they were insignificant enough that they didn't charge us any money to teach us a lesson. And we mitigated them to their satisfaction. It took us 2 years to mitigate the last SIP audit. 2 years. That was excessive, and there were some problems with personnel. That was SPP. I shouldn't say this on camera, but I will. There were some problems with personnel down at SPP that we kept, it just kept going and going and going. We couldn't get it mitigated. It wasn't just fix this and do that. They wanted us to fix the world. And so we finally got that cut off. Let me show you. Here is the bottom line. There's some detail. So you may have seen this already in your packet. Back in the day, 2010, that was our first audit. Everybody was brand new. They did them both at the same time. So we had an O&P over at the service center. We had that down on the first floor. I was upstairs with the SIP folks having one up there. They made us crazy. We were lucky to get out of that with our skins. Then in 2011, the SIP audit came around again, and this was consistent with what others were doing. This is tough stuff, especially the SIP stuff, because we were trying to find out, what do you guys want here? I know what it says, and we think we've done what it says, but, they would come up, well, the intent was that, you're not going to have a literal interpretation, a literal reading. And that's why this is so ugly. It says wear brown shoes. Yes, it does. But they may decide that you need pink shoelaces. And that doesn't say that here. Well, it's a corollary to it. Well, okay, fine. That's a lovely thing. You can see we hired good people. Joe pointed this out to me. This may be a little self-serving, but it's true. We hired good people. They're doing a good job. You see where we are from there on in. We are going to try to do that from here on out. We will probably have an audit now in 21. Used to be a 3-year period or 18-month period for audits because they did a SIP, then 18 months they did an O&P and then a SIP like that. They do them both together in MRO. Everything's different. So we're going to have our next audit from MRO in 21. We are breaking our behinds to find out what they want to do so that we can maintain this record. That's all I have there. It's up to you whether we could play this, or Mark, whether we play this YouTube video or not. It's related to this. It's kind of the same thing. Or I'll take questions.
Would you like to see this?
Just want to thank Mike. He's done an outstanding job. You see from 2011, like we said earlier, but
Thank you, Joe.
how you've done this, and you've kept, all these things you said, the SIP and OP and all this. I don't know what it means, but you're keeping us or independents from being fined, and that's
We are
great.
doing our best.
Yes, you are.
We are doing
Thank
it.
you.
And I want to say we've had management support. A lot of these people you saw that got fined up there, management didn't take it serious. They wouldn't give them resources, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to pay on this end or you're going to pay on that end. It doesn't make any sense to pay penalties to an organization outside of yours if you can pay all of that money internally on the front end and get the benefit out of it. That's a much better situation.
Any objection to seeing 4 or 5 minute film.
You want to cue that? Okay, let's see if I can. It's kind of cute. Oh, I got it. Am I going to get? I'm not getting sound. I don't want that sound, Steve. Is there anything to do? No. Well, maybe you don't need to see this. I'm sorry. It's
Take our word for it. It was great.
Yeah. The URL is there. You can look at it on your own. It's 5 or 6 minutes.
Thank you so very much for your
Absolutely.
presentation.
If you have any, something occurs to you later on, get a hold of any of us. We'll be glad to, any of the NERC group, we'll be glad to answer those questions.
And maybe next time we can watch the film.
Right.
Yeah, great.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, echo Joe's comment about the quality of the people we have running this division. Mike, for those who don't know, he's an attorney and a former member of the 101st Airborne. And Jim Nail over here is a graduate of the Naval Academy. Used to be in the submarines going, which so either jumping out of planes or going beneath the waves in submarines. They're a couple of pretty great guys to have on the wall guarding this for us. So we're really lucky to have them.
What about the Marines?
The who?
Okey doke. Let's move ahead then. And Lisa, we'd like to have a report from the water pollution control people, including you.
Guess that's me. So, all right. Well, I know that you'd requested, these were your requests to see today. For the financial report, Finance gave everybody a copy of the capital budget for all three utilities today. Maybe the easiest way to go through this will just be to go down the list of projects to give you by way of update, because you're wanting project updates as well, I believe. So just to go over kind of how this is laid out, because it's the first time I've seen this report as well. On the left, you have our current budgeted
Lisa?
capital. Yeah.
The root project I think we're all concerned about is your lime stabilization project and how that's coming along.
We meet tomorrow at 10 to make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and 100% review. And so that should be out to bid in December.
So when's construction start?
It'll be out for bid for about a month and review. It'll be early 2020.
Okay, good.
So, and construction has always been projected to be a 9-month process for that.
Yeah, that's what I think he was.
Just that one? Okay. Well, I can give you a rundown of our other capital projects for the year, just so you have an update. If you look toward this list, the ones that actually have here on the left that have dollar amounts assigned to them instead of the zero, those are all our current fiscal year projects. Fairmount Highlands and Arlington are both currently under investigation in-house. Those are both very similar projects where we have either parallel lines for some unknown reason, literally side by side down the road. There's no reason to have dual lines, and people are tied into both of them, no rhyme or reason. So basically those projects are going to clean that up, have a single pipe that'll give us capacity improvements and I&I improvements, because if you have two pipelines that aren't required for capacity, you have double the chance for inflow and infiltration. So if we can get one of those pipes removed, we have less extra water coming into the system that doesn't need to be there. Bison Park is one of our lift stations, actually very close to here. There's a slope stabilization effort that's going on. Basically, we are concerned that station could slide right off the back of the hill, to be honest. So our force main actually was exposed, and we had a sanitary sewer overflow because the ground sloughing away actually pulled the force main, one of the joints loose. So it is currently sitting above ground, a portion of it. And so there's effort there to keep it warm with the recent temperatures and everything. So that's actually kind of an emergency status project at this point, at least to get that force main back underground. So we're gonna actually bore that, so we don't have to open cut, because putting a excavation equipment on an unstable slope is a bad idea. So that one is one we're working on every day, trying to get that resolved as quickly as possible. Neighborhood improvements, we're laying out just projects for this next fiscal year and picking those locations. I know Mr. Atkins had asked how we prioritize projects and what are our trouble areas in town. Basically, if you look at our capital projects for the next, we always have a 5-year projection. Those are our trouble areas. So we're when we did our rate increase for the, a few years ago that had the steps in, that was to fund depreciation by means of replacing problem pipes in the system. So we've always had a repair and replacement program in place. So those projects are just part of our ongoing capital replacement program. Yes.
42nd Terrace.
It's a storm project.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it done yet, or is it going to be done?
It's not done. It's in Public Works' court. Once things go to construction, they're no longer WPCs. I believe that contract stated it was supposed to be completed by the end of this calendar year. Where were we? Biosolids, you got the update on that. Raw pumps and screening, we have, that actually looks like it's going to be a little better than anticipated on the pump side. So we'll have some more money to put towards screening, which will actually protect our pumps better than just going in and replacing them. We can protect them and bring them, while they're old, they're still in good shape. So it looks like maybe some sandblasting, painting, and they'll still be serviceable. Our substation rehabilitation, just as a refresher, the way we switch power if we lose one of our feeds at the plant is actually a very dangerous and manual process. And so this is just to have a contractor come in and do some modern electrical work on that to make it an automatic transfer and much safer for our electrician, who actually currently is the one that has to do the switch. And fence is pretty self-explanatory. That's our fence at the treatment plant. Truman and Harris is our portion of kind of a group project, removal of a dangerous building at the intersection of Truman and Harris, but that's going to cause some slope issues, and then there's also a stormwater component of that one as well. So that's just our portion of making sure our infrastructure is protected when that building comes down. Those are our current fiscal year projects. If you have any questions about the ones on the right, those are still open projects from previous fiscal years that are still in process. I'm happy to answer.
I do have one question about somewhere I heard that we were having troubles with the sewage issue in Kentucky Hills. And we're going to see about relining.
We're doing a lateral lining project for that entire neighborhood. So this is a pilot project for us. It's our first effort at lateral lining, and we're doing every house in that subdivision. The effort there is to keep, again, inflow and infiltration, keep all that extra water out of the system. So those homes, there's 5 homes that are getting water backed up into their basements in rain events, but it's coming from the sewer system, not the storm.
Now, is that a capital project that you're doing?
It's actually being done under trenchless tech because it's still lining. So it's being done under the trenchless technology capital fund.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Now, are we communicating with the customers?
Yes, it's actually, I spoke with their head of their HOA like 3 weeks ago. She was just looking for an update. It's going to be probably a 9-month process to get every house lined.
Okay, thank you.
And then on trenchless tech, we have our next authorization. That's another 40 line segments. That's currently, we've selected all the line segments. Pretty sure they're going to make the cut, and we'll have another 40 line segments lined. They're currently in capacity review just to make sure the lining won't impact capacity to the point where we would actually be causing a problem instead of helping. So otherwise, I mean, those are our major efforts going on. And then obviously trying to finalize the list there on the right of that, of this report. And then I believe next month we'll have a monthly financial report according to finance. But we've been kind of talking about ending fund balance and what that should include and what it shouldn't, so things that are committed, funds that are assigned, and all that is actually included. And as we talked about during our rate discussion, we planned to be going the wrong way, right? And go into the negative for a little while. And then those increases would bring us back out. So this is our last year of diving down. And we project to be into fund balance by $877,000 at the end of this fiscal year, and then start to come out of that on the other side in next fiscal year. And that includes the $5.1 million for the biosolids project. As far as issues on the horizon, again, when you ask about what our potential pain points are, regulatory issues are always our biggest fear, just because DNR can mandate, EPA can mandate at any moment, and then we have to adapt to that. So the biggest thing that's out there on the horizon for us currently is we're starting to see a lot of communities that are having nitrogen and phosphorus requirements actually put into their NPDES permit, which would be potentially something we'd have to do modifications to our treatment plant to actually conform to any nitrogen and phosphorus removal limits they may set for us. Currently, we're only in monitoring mode, but typically when they put you in monitoring, that means they're going to put you into some kind of compliance limit soon following. Our current permit is good until 2024, so we should be set until then, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see and talk to DNR as much as we can to get a heads up on that, what could be coming down the pipe for us. So, anything else I can answer for you?
No. Well, anything? Just for the record, we want to show that our member Garland Land joined us at about 10 minutes after 3, and so he's here. Thanks, Garland, for being here.
Apologize. There was a wreck on I-70. I was coming from downtown Kansas City.
Those darn wrecks on I-70, I swear. Yeah. Okay, great. Any questions further for Lisa?
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. And I, after going over this, I'd like to have some time with you. I'll call you. Great. Thanks. Okey-doke. Moving right along to water. Dan?
Yes, well, turn this on. The first part that we can talk about today, I had a couple items I'd like to bring to the board. The EPA's, I'm asked Deputy Director Matt McLaughlin to give us an update on the EPA's America's Water Infrastructure Act, AWIA of 2008 risk assessments and emergency response plans. He's been involved with it, dealing with a consultant on that, and I thought it would be easier for him to give that update.
Thank you. This is an act that was passed by Congress earlier this year. It includes many sections for the public drinking water system infrastructure, including new technologies, funding sources, asset management strategies. The one that we're dealing with in particular right now is the risk and resilience section. This kind of goes along with what Mike presented earlier for IP&L. This deals with our resiliency and making sure that we are able to maintain service to our customers no matter what kind of threats that we could see. We did one similar like this in response to 9/11 back in 2002. That assessment covered mainly terrorist activities or threats to the utility. This new act, or this latest act, it broadens that and also includes things such as natural disasters like ice storms, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, something that could impact us, along with the other side of the a terrorist attack or an attack on us, an intentional attack, which would be the cybersecurity. Back in 2002, it wasn't really covered very much. It was more just our facilities, our infrastructure, to making sure that we were resilient enough to sustain those. Since that time, we've implemented what the weaknesses that we discovered with that 2002 assessment, put in many security facilities, put in some redundant items to make sure that if one thing went down, we can always continue to operate. This act, like I said, is encompassing some other areas along with the cyber. It's not only our operations, but we have to look at like our financing part. We have to look at our customer service, the personal information that we hold for all of our customers to make sure that that's secure, that nobody can get to that information as well. So this encompasses not only the water department, but other areas of the city as well, like I said, finance, our IT, our information technology department, along with our customer service issues in that too. We are required to have this done by March 31st of 2020. We started this early on. I think we're ahead of the pack on most public utilities, so we don't see an issue of that getting completed by that time. Another thing that's different from our previous assessment is this requires us to also update our emergency operations plan to take into consideration anything that we would find during this assessment to make sure that's covered in that. We're required to have those updates done 6 months following, which will be September 30th. And then 5 years from now, we're required to go back and do the assessment all over again and update it. So it's kind of a continuing effort, but that's where we're at right now.
Coming in to do it?
What's that?
Did somebody else come in to do the audit?
We're working with a consultant to get it done. We're pretty comfortable on, we haven't had many changes really on our facility since the 2002, not many large changes, but the other side of it, the cybersecurity and that, we're not comfortable enough to do that on our own. So we've involved an outside source to help us along with those kind of things.
It was the same firm that did the vulnerability assessment a few years ago, so they were up to speed to start with. That was a theory, and now they've just expanded on it.
Yep. Richard?
Any other questions on that?
Question?
Okay, the next item I thought I would bring to your attention was Water Service Termination Cooperative Agreement with Sugar Creek to address non-payment of sewer bills. So what that means is, I mentioned the last meeting we had that the history of the water utility and how we came to where we are. So we were once a private utility, so we were serving outside of Independence, the customers. So we have 3,500 customers outside of Independence that we serve. What makes that unique is that, so those 3,500 people will either have, say, Kansas City sewers or Blue Springs sewers or Lee Summit or Sugar Creek in this case. And some of those folks decide, well, since they don't control the water, we just won't pay the sewer bill. And so they don't pay the sewer bill, and they end up with a $3,000 or $4,000 sewer bill and just thumb their nose at the local jurisdiction. And so what the state of Missouri set up was a section 393.016, the revised status of Missouri, which requires utilities to enter into agreements with these folks. So a water utility would have to enter in with a sewer to work out some kind of an agreement to be able to shut these folks off. In the past, what we've done, I'm looking at, we have 50.
Somebody's sewer.
How do we shut off their sewers with our water? So they can't shut the sewer off. So that's a good question.
I just thought it ran downhill.
So it does run downhill, but in this case, the reason that's why they don't pay the sewer bill is because there's no way to really shut it off. I guess they could go cut it and block it, and then basically somebody be kicked out of their house. So that wouldn't be good either, but it's really not a joke in that sense. They're just trying to get revenue, because when the sewage goes to the sewage treatment plant, somebody's have to pay the treatment. And we all know that it costs a little more to treat sewage than it does water, quite honestly, in most areas. So in our case, we've worked out in the past when we had our own IT, we would, for instance, Blue Springs has 50 customers. We went out and set up a program to put them on our billing, okay? And then we'd turn around and charge them to collect billing. The sewers cost. Well, same thing for Blue Summit. It's unincorporated Jackson County. That area is served by Kansas City, Missouri. You kind of think of the watersheds. Where does the stuff flow downhill? It's going to flow in Blue Summit. It's going to flow towards Kansas City. So what happens is we worked out a deal with them on their 104 customers that in the Blue Summit area, we would put them on our bill. We'd collect the water and sewer, and if they didn't pay the water and sewer, we'd shut their water off. And in the money we collected for the sewer, we would turn around and bill back and give that money to Kansas City in this case, and Blue Summit. Or if, I think the other day, had a call from Channel 9 because we were answering questions about somebody's complaining about their sewer bill. Well, it gets complicated in that sense. We start having to answer questions about somebody else's sewer bill and why their costs are 4 times what leases are. So we're having to, another thing came up. Well, so Sugar Creek comes along and they have 583 customers, okay, because they've been our customer forever. The water plants in Sugar Creek, you can just imagine we've got transmission mains cut right through Sugar Creek. We're serving all these customers. So we have a new billing manager. Denise Clark came from Columbia, Missouri, and how they handled it in Columbia, Missouri was a little different. What they did is work out an arrangement where they said, okay, Sugar Creek, in this case, you'll send them out a letter that says, hey, we're going to disconnect. We're going to have Independence disconnect you in the future. We're going to work this. We have this agreement. That's what we're working on. We'll have an agreement. We'll charge them, I think it's $130 is what we're going to charge them to disconnect the customer. But the first thing they'll do is try to send a letter and say, hey, this is going to happen. And that letter will charge them like $30 for the letter. They'll send letters. We'll send letters. It'll be very clear to a customer if they haven't been paying their bills that they're going to have to pay the bill, or we're going to come out and shut the water off. They've never seen that before, so there'll be an education process to do that. So that's where we are with Sugar Creek as an option. So we worked out, rather than the other option was to bill them. What that meant now, instead of going to our tech services, we would go out to the new advanced utility system billing folks, pay them several thousands of dollars in order to get that in the billing system. But this opportunity came up, and it sounds so much simpler for us to handle. And the other beauty of that is, from what Denise Clark, our customer service manager, was saying, is once they get educated on the sewer billing, they're going to start paying their bill because they know we're not kidding. We will come out and shut them off. So once they understand that, they will start paying the bills. She said that they might have 1 or 2 a month that they would be shutting off for customers. So that's the direction we're going to be going. There'll be a learning curve. We hope not to have to shut anybody off. They'll just be educated and say that they can no longer just ignore sewer bills. They'll have to pay Sugar Creek, and if Sugar Creek notifies us that they haven't been paid, then we'll be notified to go disconnect them. And when the language, it's like a 4 or 5 page agreement. I didn't send it to you yet right now because it's over at Sugar Creek being crafted. They're looking at it and marking it up and asking them, whatever but everything is based on other utilities of already doing this. And Columbia, Missouri was our example that we used in Boone County. And we've taken that, marked it up, changed it to reflect what we need, but it also reflects everything under this section 393.016 of the revised status of Missouri. You go out and read that revised status that Missouri has out there, and it's going to read almost identical to this document that we have Sugar Creek reviewing. I'm just bringing it to your attention to know that we're going to start this process. We've not done it in the past. It's just an opportunity to work with one of our wholesale customers. And the other thing is that if you read on, it says this revised status requires utilities to have an agreement. So it's really not an option. We're going to have to do it anyway. The fact is we're just going to use somebody else's as the guinea pig and not start from scratch. And we're not going to have to do the billing. When we start talking about doing these questions, like sitting before Channel 9 News and answering questions about Kansas City sewers, that's all because that's on our bill. They call in, talk to our customer service reps, and we're getting, for Blue Summit, we're getting 85 cents to do that per customer. And it costs 55 cents to mail out an envelope with the mail-in. And now, granted, our bill's in that too. So it's not like we're making a lot of money on the other option. So it's kind of a neutral type thing, but I'm thinking this is going to be a win-win for both parties. So I just thought I'd bring it to everybody's attention. And if you had any comments or thoughts, this is where we are.
Dan,
Yes.
is Sugar Creek fully AMI now?
That's what I'm hearing. I don't know their business.
Is that water too?
That would be, they'd just have water, and that's all they would have is water. I don't think they have. Kansas City Power and Light serves Sugar Creek, I believe.
Well,
So
they're
that might be, they
AMI.
might be.
Kansas City's AMI.
Yes. Well,
Power and
then
Light.
Kansas City Power and Light is, because the water plants is in Sugar Creek, and that's Kansas City Power and Light. So.
Yeah, well, then we're not reading the water meters then.
We're reading these 583 are our direct customers. These 500.
We don't have AMI on those meters.
No, we don't. We don't have any AMI on any of our.
But yet they're in Sugar Creek city limits.
Yes. We have 3,500 customers outside of independent city limits.
Yeah, I know
we
that,
serve.
but the 500 down there don't have AMI on their water meters.
None of ours, no.
Okay.
This is nitty gritty, but it just seems to me that sending out a letter for a $30 fine is a little bit high. Maybe not, but if it's a form letter and it takes one time for us to go over it and write it, and then all we've got to do is address it, $30 just feels high to me. If I were to get that, it would feel high to me. The other point is, if we charge $130 to disconnect, do we charge something to reconnect?
That includes disconnect and
It's a
reconnect.
one-time charge for
Right.
both services.
And the way it's written, if we get into a situation where it's going to cost us to dig it up, and they got a service line that's some old galvanized stuff that's going to break, and Larry's shaking his head because he's been down this path a few times, but then that cost could increase, and we could pass those costs on along to Sugar Creek. But in turn, Sugar Creek going to turn around and slap it on the customer who caused that to start with, because we don't own service lines, the customer service lines, and if they're in bad shape and we can't shut them off, basically, in most people's cases, your service line, you really normally can't shut it off if you don't go out and move it all the time. And the oldest people that work is the ones that get disconnected every month. So most of them are not good about working. It's not unusual.
Dan, are you gonna go over the, water capital outlay?
We can.
You don't have,
We
it's
have
up
it
to
right
you.
here. Matt,
I just have one question on it.
please. We got our
What are we
capital budget
What
expert
are we
right
doing
here.
at the 39th Street Reservoir?
39th Street Reservoir, we're looking, that needs to be repainted like we did 35th Street. We'll have it inspected and then figure out what exactly all needs to be done on that. But it's up for repaint again.
Wow.
Yeah,
Prices have
that's-
gone up since
Yeah,
I operated.
that's a 5
$1
million gallon
million?
reservoir.
Yeah?
And yeah, by the time you get done with all, that's got some contingency in there for improvements, structural
Right,
improvements and
right.
things. But yeah, painting's not cheap. I mean, it's
Yeah, I used to. Ooh.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
Anything else?
Dan, on the Sugar Creek, the range book.
Speak.
Microphone's on.
Is there measures to consider landlords that would hold property that had outstanding? You mentioned some very high bills there for sewer to Kansas City, but might be hidden to the landlord, and then there's no one to bill.
And that will be Sugar Creek's problem. I mean, quite honestly, in our case, we even have, there's language in this document where if for some reason or other we had to shut the water off for an extended period of time, we have the right to bill Sugar Creek for the amount of water loss that we've lost because we're not billing for the water. All that's in that state requirement. But it's, to answer your question on a landlord, or, you know, there could be some complicated issues that, but again, if there was an issue with the service line that was bad and it was owned by the owner was the landlord, then that I could say Sugar Creek could pass those. I'm not getting into their business, but I'm sure there's some growing pains we're going to have with this. But I was told by the Sugar Creek staff, just the fact that they're talking about that, some folks are starting to pay their sewer bills just because they had an ordinance, you know, where they talked about coming to us and do this. So I think if word gets out that this is not going to be just something where you can thumb your nose at it and ignore Sugar Creek, that they will start being paid for, because if they're not paying the sewer bills, everybody, all your other customers that are paying your bills are paying for the cost of those folks that don't pay. So it's only fair that everybody pays their fair share, in my eyes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving along. IPL, the next three items, A, B, and C, are going to be pulled. And just for the record, if you ever want to get a bunch of phone calls about anything, say direct and all things necessary. Those two things will get you phone calls. So if you're feeling lonely and want to do it. At any rate, I would like to pull all three of those, and I'd like to have a vote on that.
I make the motion, we pull items 1, A, B, and C, and the third
I second it.
report.
That's it. Okay, any discussion on these items?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is I'm fully aware that our board's position and direction and role to the city is not to direct anything for anybody for any time. It is to advise and recommend. Unfortunately, many of the things that we've advised and recommended, we don't get any feedback on, and I hope that someday we work out a better relationship so that that happens. But in this case, we just need to go back to the drawing board and come up with different motions or different agenda items for next meeting. So with that, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment, even though we're going to pull it, about these lights at City Hall. I was up at the last meeting, and it's terrible up there, how dark it is. And it's ridiculous for the City Hall, especially that time of night for, when people are going in and out of the meetings. And nowadays, with all the lights and all the different fixtures that's out there, we can do a lot better job, or IPL can do a lot better job than what's up there now.
That's so that the city council can get out quick.
Oh, here. Sure.
Just to bring a little clarification to that, that's city-owned properties up there, not IPL properties. Inquiries for lighting would go to the Public Works Director, and the Public Works Director would then decide whether they want them or
Either
not.
way, we can do better. The whole city can do better with the lighting out there. That's it.
Yeah.
I call for a vote, please.
Okay. All in favor of the motion of pulling these three items, say aye. Oh, wait a minute, scratch. We're now doing a roll call for each item,
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Garland Land,
Yes.
Joe Zack,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Jerry Atkins.
Yes. Okay, moving on to the next item then. Are there any board comments that want to be expressed?
Yes, I want to express something, Mr. Chairman. At the end, our last meeting, Christine called for a roll call on adjournment. I checked Robert's rules. You do not have to have a roll call vote for an adjournment. Simply, if somebody has an objection to adjourning, then they state it, and then we have a vote then. If there's no objection, you just adjourn.
Okay,
So we need to correct that.
thanks for that. Anything else?
Yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
We received information that we are setting up two subcommittees, one of which would look at our rules with Larry as chairperson. And I'd like to invite anyone that has suggestions or has marked changes to please funnel those to us so we can have that to work with. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I got you covered on that. I am putting out on my Gmail that any suggestions you have, get them to me. And we have to have one more member now that Rick is no longer here, so it's just me and you. If we get together maybe next week and talk a little bit anyway. We don't have to have the sunshine law then.
Right.
Okay?
Please make sure you're okay on the sunshine law. I don't want to get us in trouble. The last thing that I'd like to present is to give out copies. One of our ratepayers, Lowell Croft, has updated our rates for 2018 and how Independence Power and Light has fared with the power companies that have been listed here. And once again, it's information. Oh, excuse me. And give some. Would you pass those on over there? Oh, just get. Oh, to those folks.
Oh,
Give it to Mark. He can get. Maybe he can make copies. It basically is indicating how we're doing with our competitors. Kansas City Power and Light. It has Empire District, Harrisonville, Columbia, Kansas City, GMO, which is the old Aquila utility, and also Springfield. And hopefully the next year's numbers will be substantially better when we have the 6% reduction. The other thing that Mr. And I want to thank Lowell for putting this together again. Thank you, Lowell. it has the specifics of what is included in the data. It has the specifics on how the data is computed, and it has the specifics on who submits data to it. And we are one of the we are a utility that reports this data. This is data that Independence Power and Light has reported to the U.S. Energy Department for them to calculate our rates and how we compare to everyone else. So hopefully next year our numbers will look substantially better than they do this year. It's hopefully that folks will pay attention and see what our direction needs to be for the future. I know that IPL would challenge these numbers. As of today, I still haven't seen how that their numbers equate to show that we're the lowest rate electricity user in the metropolitan area. I know we're touting it right now, and I hope the 6% plays out that way. But I'd sure like to know, as the board would like to know, I would think, how that number is actually calculated rather than just rhetoric that it's there. But thank you for the time, and that's all I have.
Can I just say one thing real quick? Again, this is, I know you weren't there at the presentation we had about those rates. What we were trying to do is to make the point that the EIA statistics is a nice metric, but it's not the same as rates. You could have two communities with the exact same rates that would have different EIA rates, because this is taking your revenue and dividing it by kilowatt hours. So it's a little different. We had a presentation at a meeting about that. So we could bring that back up again about why, about how this is not exactly talking what your rates are, but it's related to rates, but it's not really rates. So what we would love to do is have that conversation again, talk about that. And what I wanted to do also is to quickly ask if you're all having a special meeting in December, because we're planning to get the new rate structure to council on December 9th. So you usually have a blocked out time on your schedule for a special meeting, which would be December 5th. I don't know if would like to get that before PUAB, before it goes to a study session for the council to take a look at the new rates.
Before we go on,
Before going on, I'd be happy to see any kind of work that you have.
Love to.
And I would think that as an organization, we'd want to be in the best possible shape. For whatever reason, however we're comparing with the rest of the world, we're not comparing very well. And we can say the reason why, and maybe they're very valid, but until we see that data, it's very hard to comprehend.
Yeah, and like I said, we tried to provide that before, because it's things like if the more customers you have or the more kilowatt hours of use, it's a lot more to spread over overhead costs over. Also, if you have like declining rate blocks, which you might have, if you have one city has higher usage than another does on average usage of customer, the more you use, the cheaper it gets. If you have declining rate blocks, which we have and a lot of people have, but the new rate structure, we're trying to get away from those declining rate blocks. So there's different things that can make that kind of throw those off. And so we'd be happy to bring that back again. We could do a abbreviated version of it. And so I think it's great. I appreciate you bringing it up. We'd love to have that comparison again. But that reminds me that the rates is a thing that if you're going to have that meeting, I know you like to see it before the council, Deb. It's going to be a study session. They're not going to adopt the rates that night. They're just going to get that first, look at them.
Mark, I appreciate your effort, and I appreciate all the work you do on the rates. I would like to, before we adjourn, make a motion that we meet on December 5th, if that is suitable with you, to have it ready.
That's what we're shooting
for. We'll take a look at it on December 5th. Is that all right with you? Huh?
would you say the 5th?
Yeah. I made a motion.
Second.
Need a second.
Second. I just have a quick question. Mark, was that the same date you wanted to have our annual Christmas party in Gala?
Oh, yeah, we'll do it right in here.
Just checking.
There'll be
we could
cookies
get
back
gifts.
there, I think. That's right. So,
Okay. Any discussion on December the 5th, another meeting?
Call for a vote.
yeah, the usual.
Let me pull up my calendar.
Christine?
Are we gonna still have the regular meeting or just the December 5th meeting?
Just have the,
Let's just move the regular meeting to the 5th.
Well, that'll be fine.
That's fine with me. if
I'm just
that's-
saying, I made my motion for December the 5th. You want to make it a regular meeting, okay, or a orgasmic meeting, I don't know.
Well, that's the discussion that we can have. You,
You might
Jesus.
likely choose to not have the regular meeting on its regular date because it's so close to Christmas.
right, good idea.
Well, I still say, then we'll meet December 5th, and we won't meet.
Yes,
later on.
2:30.
let's meet December the 5th and we'll
Jesus.
discuss.
2:30.
Okay,
It's a simple motion.
Yes.
okay.
Aye.
Any further discussion about that? Roll call, please.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Garland Land,
Yes.
Joe Zack,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Jerry Atkins.
Yes. Motion carried. Next meeting's on December the 5th, right here, same time, same place.
Mr. Chairman, also, can I say the city manager apologizes that he wasn't able to be here today because was called out of town, but he'd like to be at the next meeting. He's going to explain a little more about the change we're doing with the general manager and how we're doing a transition of the oversight of utilities to the other assistant city manager is going to take that over. We're trading off our oversight responsibilities, and so he was going to be here to explain that to you. Couldn't make, so he apologized, but he'll be here to explain it next time.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody's
He's gonna be here This
efforts.
time, too.
Yeah. Again, thanks for everybody's efforts.
I hear a
We're
motion
adjourned.
to adjourn.
Yes.
I second.
Adjourned.
Yes.